Micah had lost his way long before the forest grew quiet. At 38, he was a ranger in a sprawling wilderness, his cabin a speck among pines, but the job that once lit him up now felt like a chore. 5 years ago, a car accident had taken his daughter, Lily, and his marriage crumbled in the aftermath, his wife unable to bear the grief they couldn't share. Micah stayed in the forest, patrolling trails, fixing signs, but it was routine, not purpose. He'd wake to silence, his days mechanical, his nights haunted by what he couldn't save. The forest, once alive with Lily's laughter on their hikes, was just trees now, vast and indifferent. He didn't talk much anymore, not to colleagues, not to the locals who nodded but kept their distance. Depression wasn't loud for him. It was a fog dulling everything, making him wonder why he bothered at all. One stormy evening, patrolling a rain-soaked trail, he heard a faint rustle, not the usual deer or wind. He followed it, flashlight cutting through the dark, and found her. A barn owl, small and shivering, her feathers matted, eyes clouded white. She was blind, likely born that way, her wings weak from hunger, one bent from a fall. She didn't flinch as Micah approached, just tilted her head, her stillness eerie but alive. He'd seen owls before, gliding like ghosts, but this one was grounded, defenseless, a creature that shouldn't survive out here. Micah didn't know why he didn't walk away. Owls died, that was nature. Maybe it was her quiet fight, her refusal to give up, that hit him. He'd lost Lily, lost himself, and starting over seemed pointless. But this owl, blind and frail, was still here, and he couldn't ignore that. He scooped her up, wrapping her in his jacket, her warmth faint against him. Back at his cabin, he set her in a crate with an old blanket, calling her Whisper for the soft sounds she made. He didn't know owls, didn't know healing. His life was a mess, grief, a weight he couldn't shed, his ranger work a shadow of what it was. He'd stopped believing he could fix anything, stopped thinking he was worth saving. But Whisper's head turned, tracking his voice, like she saw him despite her blindness. He dug out a dusty field guide, searched online for how to care for a herd owl, reading about feeding, about blind birds surviving by sound. Fear gnawed at him. He'd failed Lily, failed his wife, let his life slip into gray. What if he failed this creature too, proved he was as useless as he felt? Whisper didn't move much, but her beak snapped when he offered meat, a spark of life that held him. He didn't believe in signs, didn't think one owl could change his days, but she was here, fighting, and he decided to try, just for now, to keep her alive, learn her ways, see what happened. It wasn't a plan, wasn't redemption, just a choice to show up for something still breathing, when he'd long stopped showing up for himself. Micah didn't know it yet, but that choice would cut through the silence, leading him to a purpose he thought he'd buried forever. If Micah's grief and Whisper's quiet strength tugged at your heart, if you've ever felt lost in the dark, hit the like button now. It's a nod to everyone searching for light, just like Micah is starting to. Subscribe to join a community that believes in finding purpose, where stories like this remind us there's always a way forward. Stay with us to see how an owl changes everything. You won't want to miss it. What's helped you find hope in a silent time? Share in the comments. Micah's cabin felt less like a tomb with Whisper in it. The blind barn owl, small and fragile, perched in her crate, her clouded eyes turning to his voice. Grief still clung to him. Lily's laughter gone, his marriage a scar, the forest a reminder of what he'd lost. At 38, his ranger work was rote, his days blending into nights where sleep dodged him. He'd shut out the world, colleagues' check-ins brushed off, locals' nods ignored, but Whisper needed him. And that pulled him from the fog, if only a step. He'd learned fast, scouring guides on owl care, calling a wildlife rehabber for advice. He'd feed her slivers of meat, patient as she snapped, her hunger fierce despite her weakness. Her bent wing, not broken, needed time, so he'd built a perch from scrap wood low enough for her to climb. Micah would talk to her, voice rough about the trails, about Lily's love for owls, about how he'd failed to save what mattered. Whisper's soft hoots, her head tilting. To his words felt like listening, and he found himself speaking more, the cabin less silent. He'd watch her, learning how she moved, how she'd freeze at new sounds, then pivot, her blindness no match for her ears. She was teaching herself to see by sound, and Micah helped, tapping sticks, rustling leaves, guiding her to turn. Her trust grew. She'd let him touch her wing, her feathers soft under his calloused hands. That trust shook him. He'd loved Lily, loved his wife, and lost them both. His heart too raw to risk again. Letting Whisper in, even an owl, felt like tempting loss. Doubt gnawed. What if he failed her, like he'd failed his family? A colleague, dropping off supplies, saw Whisper and frowned, saying wild things didn't belong in cabins, that Micah was fooling himself thinking he could save her. The words hit hard, echoing his fears. He wasn't enough, never had been. He'd let Lily die, let his wife walk away, let his life gray. Why would this be different? But Whisper would. Shuffle closer, her beak grazing his finger, and Micah's resolve steadied. He kept at it, strengthening her wing with gentle stretches, teaching her to track sounds, coins dropped, whispers, footsteps. She'd respond, wings twitching, like she believed in him. He started small outside, too, clearing a trail he'd neglected, nodding back to a local. The forest felt less heavy, Lily's memory not just pain but a nudge to try. He'd take Whisper to a clearing at dusk, letting her feel the air, her head, swiveling to crickets, to wind. She wasn't flying yet, but she was readying, and so was he. His colleagues noticed, one joking he looked less like a ghost. Micah didn't smile, but he didn't snap back. He'd started sketching again, something he'd done with Lily. Owls, trees, Whisper's sharp beak. The drawings weren't art, just proof he could make something still. The grief didn't lift. It was there, in the quiet, in the empty chair. But Whisper's fight, her way of seeing without sight, showed him. He could move through it. He wasn't healed, wasn't whole, but he was here, showing up for her. He'd built a bigger perch, let her practice flapping, her wings stronger each day. The ranger station buzzed with talk of cuts, of trails closing. But Micah cared now, spoke up once, surprising himself. Whisper wasn't a cure. She was a mirror, reflecting a man who'd stopped but could start again. He didn't know if she'd fly, didn't know if he'd find his place. Fear lingered. He'd lost too much to trust. Easy wins. But each night he'd sit by her, her hoots filling the dark, and feel the silence soften. He'd whisper about Lily, about wanting to be enough, and Whisper would turn, like she heard. Micah kept going, one sound, one step, one day, with an owl who saw him when he couldn't see himself, guiding him towards something he might call purpose. Micah's cabin glowed with a warmth it hadn't held in years. Whisper's presence a quiet pulse in the dark. The blind barn owl was stronger now, her bent, wing mended, her feathers sleek as she perched high, tracking sounds with uncanny precision. Grief still shadowed Micah. Lily's loss a wound, his broken marriage a scar, but Whisper's fight had stirred him, made him show up when he'd long stopped trying. His ranger work, once a slog, felt alive again. He'd clear trails with care, nod to locals, even joke with colleagues. The forest wasn't just a reminder of loss anymore. It was where he'd found her, and where he was finding himself. Whisper had learned to see by sound, pivoting to Micah's claps, to leaves rustling, her wings itching for air. He'd take her to a clearing, letting her flap, her strength growing, though flight seemed a distant hope. One evening, testing her in the dusk, she startled. A twig snapped and she launched, wobbling but airborne, landing soft on a low branch. Micah's breath caught, awe and fear colliding. She'd flown, blind but sure, guided by sound alone. A hiker, a local named Tara, saw it, her eyes wide. She'd heard about the owl, knew Micah's story. Lily, the accident, his retreat. Tara ran a conservation group fighting to save the forest from budget cuts, and she called Whisper's flight a miracle, saying Micah's work with her was proof of what one person could do. She asked him to bring Whisper to a town meeting. to share their story, rally support for the trails. Micah froze. He wasn't a leader, wasn't someone who spoke. He'd failed Lily, failed his wife, let depression bury him. The idea of standing before a crowd, their eyes on him, churned his gut. Tara pressed, saying the forest needed him, that Whisper's survival could wake people up. Then came the twist. Tara had posted about Whisper online, a clip of her wobbly flight, and it spread. Locals shared it, strangers commented, a wildlife blog picked it up. People called Micah a hero, said his care had saved a creature most would have left. A ranger colleague showed him the post, saying the station was buzzing, that his work could save jobs, trails, maybe more owls. Micah learned the forest's cuts weren't just local. Development threatened owl habitats, and Whisper's story tied to a bigger fight. Tara's group wanted him to teach, to show others how to help wildlife, blind or not. Doubt surged. He'd never been enough, never saved what mattered most. His colleague's warning rang, saying wild owls didn't belong with rangers, that he'd fail her yet. But Whisper turned to his voice, her hoot soft, like she trusted him to try. The meeting loomed, and Micah walked the clearing with her, her wings twitching, ready for more. He thought of Lily, how she'd chase owls with him, how she'd want him to fight. The town wasn't his stage. He'd hidden too long, feared their judgment. But Whisper had flown, seen the world her way, and maybe he could face his. He agreed to speak, not for praise, but for her, for the forest, for the man he might still be. That night he sat by her perch, sketching her silhouette against a moonlit pine. The post's comments echoed. People moved by a blind owl, by a ranger who didn't quit. Micah didn't feel heroic, didn't feel ready. Fear clung tight. What if he failed? What if he let Whisper down? Let Lily's memory fade? But she'd flown, hadn't she? Blind, against odds because he'd taught her how. He held Tara's flyer, Whisper's hoot filling the cabin, and felt it. A purpose, small but growing, tied to a forest he loved, and a daughter he'd never stop carrying. The meeting wasn't everything. It was a start, a chance to stand, not for himself but for what lived. With an owl who'd seen him through the dark, urging him to step into the light he'd forgotten how to find. Micah stood in the forest clearing, the stars sharp above, the air alive with the hoots of owls he'd learned to hear again. Whisper, the blind barn owl, was gone from his cabin, her perch empty, her presence woven into the trails he walked. She'd flown free weeks ago, her wings strong, guided by sound to a world she'd never see, but claimed anyway. Grief hadn't left Micah. Lily's loss still cut, his marriage a quiet ache, but it didn't own him now. The forest, once a tomb for his pain, was home again, vibrant with purpose he'd thought he'd buried. The town meeting had been a turning point. Micah had spoken, voice steady, about saving Whisper, about the forest's need. The crowd, locals, rangers, kids, listened, clapped, pledged to fight the cuts. His story, Whisper's flight, had rallied them, saving trails, jobs, a stretch of owl habitat named Whisper's Grove. Micah had expected to falter, to be the broken man they'd pity, but he wasn't. He joined Tara's conservation group, teaching others to protect wildlife, to listen for owls, to care for the hurt ones. His hands, once idle, now built nest boxes. His sketches of Whisper pinned at the ranger station, a quiet claim to who he was becoming. The town saw him differently, not the ranger who'd faded, but the one who'd brought a blind owl back to the sky. Colleagues joked he'd gone soft, but they stayed late, helping him patrol, their laughter new. Locals stopped him, sharing owl sightings, kids drawing Whisper for school projects. His cabin wasn't silent anymore. Friends dropped by. Tara brought maps for new trails, and Micah listened, spoke, belonged. He'd started hiking with purpose. Lily's memory not just pain, but a guide. Her love for the forest in every step. The group threw a festival, bonfires, owl calls, stories, and Micah helped, his voice clear as he told Whisper's tale. People shared it online, a clip of her flight trending, raising funds for more sanctuaries. Micah learned the forest's threats weren't gone. Development loomed, owls still struggled, but his work, Whisper's spark, had built a shield. He'd walk the grove at dusk, hearing owls, feeling Lily in the wind, her giggle in the leaves. Depression lingered, a shadow, but Whisper had shown him he could live through it, carry love without sinking. He'd thank her, a thought to the stars, for choosing his trail, for trusting him when he didn't trust himself. The cabin held new traces, a photo of Lily by his sketches, a conservation badge from Tara, proof he was here, fighting. One night he heard a hoot, sharp and close. Maybe Whisper, maybe not. His heart lifted, not with loss, but gratitude. She'd seen the world her way, blind but fearless, and taught him to see his, broken but enough. The town wasn't perfect. Cuts threatened, fights flared, but it was alive, united with Micah, part of it. He'd lead a workshop soon, teaching kids to hear the forest, his grief a thread, not a chain. Colleagues joined him now, their radios crackling with plans, not complaints. He wasn't whole, wasn't fearless, but he was moving, building, loving the wild he'd nearly lost. The festival had painted Whisper's silhouette on a trail sign, and Micah touched it sometimes, feeling her strength. Lily's light. The forest stretched vast, the night no longer silent but singing. And Micah walked on, not alone. He'd failed before, let pain define him, but Whisper's wings, her trust, had lifted him here, to a life not fixed, but full. He looked to the sky, the owl's calls a promise, and knew this wasn't an end. It was his, a beginning, carried forward with every hoot, every trail. Every day he chose to stay with a blind owl's courage burning bright in his heart, guiding him toward a purpose he'd make his own. Micah and Whisper's story shows even the darkest nights can find light. If their journey from grief to purpose touched you, hit the like button. It's a cheer for everyone rediscovering meaning, just like Micah did. Subscribe to join a community that believes in renewal, where stories like this guide us forward. Share this video with someone needing hope. Let's spread this spark together. What's helped you find purpose in tough times? Share in the comments.